Well, it's good. Okay, thank you very much. Every other day.
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah.
Ben, are you ready?
That's true. You can hold out.
Everybody ready? All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting for June 2023. Commissioners, you have the agenda before you. I would just call out that case number 2977 and 2905 have been postponed. Are there any other changes or additions to the agenda?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Yeah, I have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? All right. I hope you've reviewed the minutes from the May 8th meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May meeting.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Milam. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? All right. Ben, do we have a staff report this evening?
No staff reports today.
All right. Just note that there was one administratively approved case number 2978A for an accessory dwelling unit. There are 4 cases on the consent agenda. Case number 2962, a request for a special exception, front yard build-to line maximum for 702 Sisk Avenue. Case number 2963, request for site plan approval for Myers Apothecary on Concordia Avenue. Case number 2964 for site plan amendment for Oxford OBGYN at 1204 Medical Park Drive, and case number 2965, site plan amendment for the landing at Oxford Farms. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
There is a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Consent agenda is approved. That brings us to the public hearings. Our first case will be case number 2966. BRB LLC has filed a special exception as provided in section 5.6.1.2, building facade recess for property located at the intersection of Molly Bar Road and Washington Avenue.
So some on the commission might recall this piece of property, but it was previously considered with a different developer, but the owner of the property, to construct a multi-story. It was 3 residential floors with ground level parking, and it was an age-restricted facility. We now have a new applicant, or I'm sorry, we have an applicant. It's a new developer that is proposing a similar style development, with the exception that it is not age-restricted living. It will be multi-family housing. The ground floor, it's considered a basement. It will, like the previous proposal, it will have parking on it, although this proposal does have more parking within that area. for the facility. So the plan includes a total of 83 parking spaces that are provided, and then there are 15 surface spaces that are provided up on the, I guess it's the, was it the west side, east side of the property by Stone Park. Section 5613, the development code states that a portion of the facade of any buildings over 3 stories in height shall step back or it shall be recessed 1.2 feet for each foot of height over 3 stories. It further establishes the exemption from this requirement may be requested by special exception, and this is to address the reality that there are building sites and sometimes preferred architectural forms that do address the philosophy of having various articulations on that building facade. This element of the code was added, really it was around the Uncommon Oxford development that, created that, the kind of that smooth and looming architectural presence along Jackson Avenue. This proposed architecture for Chelsea Lofts is similar to what was presented with the Behringer, and it, although it's a different style, architectural style, it's very similar in that it does have a variety of architectural elements and some varied facade treatments that provide that articulation and depth and to the building along Molly Bar Road. There are different window shapes. There's steel structured porches that are all open, and there is a flat roof with multiple elements that provide some varied roof heights. Staff does support this this request or this special exception request for the reason that while it doesn't provide that step back, it does meet our we do believe that it meets the spirit of the ordinance and trying to comply with that, that varied facade, especially along Molly Bar Road. So we do recommend approval of this request. I do know that the applicant is here, could speak to that, and happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ben. So this case is for the special exception for the step back. We will look at the site plan in the next case. Any questions about the special exception from the commission?
My only question is, in the first one that we did, the age restricted, wasn't there a rooftop component to it? Like, wasn't there a rooftop bar or something?
Well, they had, yeah, you're thinking right. They actually, because it was age restricted, they were able to seek a taller building, so they had an additional floor. And then there was an element where in the attic space, they wanted to put in storage.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was a question of whether or not it was a 5-story building.
That's a totally different building, so
Correct.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
That's right.
Other questions? Good memory.
It was a good memory.
All right. Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to speak on this case? Yes, sir. Would you like to come forward? Please come forward and state your name.
Thank you. Josh Bogan, along with the others that are here, we're residents of 200 Washington condominiums, and our concern is the aesthetics of the lack of the setback from the street, the height that's going to be at that location. It's going to be a stark building that is not, I think our objection is the lack of the setback and the exception that they're seeking, and the drainage issues that may be caused by it that are addressed by the planning department that haven't been, I know that they're recommending that must be addressed before a permit for construction can be issued. But what studies are going to be required about the drainage? That's something we'd like to know. And I think the commission should question what engineering studies have been done about the drainage that is in that area, and the one on the one outlet on Molly Bar, is it going to be sufficient to handle the drainage that's going to be created by this construction? Those are the two of the main issues that we're concerned about, and we'd like to know whether these are going to be condominiums that are going to be sold, or are they going to be rentals? Obviously, that's a congested area. When school is in session, in the hours between 7:30 and 8:30, cars are lined up out there releasing students, and in the afternoons, they're lined up all up and down the street. And in the plans, they're going to remove part of the berm in the middle of the boulevard in the middle in order to provide egress and ingress to that location for the entrance to the condominiums or apartments, whatever they're going to be. It's going to create, especially on Washington, in that area, it is really going to create a traffic issue. So we understand that the zoning allows the construction of it. These are some of the, we didn't have an opportunity to really study this thing. The signs that were posted out there were posted at the very back of the property, not in a prominent location. And I just happened to notice them about a week ago, and none of the other residents were even aware because there was no place to stop, park, look at the sign. I had to put my emergency lights on to take a picture of them. They were placed in a particular location where they weren't supposed to be noticed by anyone. I wonder if the developers of the expensive condominiums across the street, the townhouses, even are aware that, of what this construction is going to look like right up on that street, nearly 4 stories in height. It's in our opinion, it should be recessed further back from the street.
Thank you, sir. So you brought up several points. One technical comment, we are looking at the site plan next, and we'll take all of your comments about drainage into advisement on that case. For this one, it's just the step back for height, the special exception. Ben, could you explain a little bit more why planning sees it in the spirit of the code, the architecture that we have here, and maybe a little bit more about what the step back requires?
Well, you see here where there, it's not just a smooth facade along, I mentioned before the Uncommon Oxford building. When you look at that building, it's just basically smooth, straight building all the way across. There are some window treatments that are on there, but it pretty much, there's no variation in depth that's provided, where here you do see, it does step back a considerable amount, probably, I don't know the exact dimension on that balcony, but, I would say at least, probably 5-6 feet, maybe even more than that. You have that, kind of let's call it the storefront, and those towers that protrude a little bit, further, at least closer to the street. So, I mean, it does have some varied looks to it, which is certainly what the ordinance was trying to seek, as opposed to having it just be smooth.
So the ordinance, by the letter of the law, would allow that smooth face up to 3 stories, and then it would require a step back of how much?
1.2 feet for each foot.
1.2 for each foot above that. So we're getting more step back at the lower elevations for a portion of the building, and maybe about the same or a little bit less at the top.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And it doesn't affect the location of the building to the street?
Correct.
Okay. Was there another question?
Well, I was gonna say, just in comparison, how tall is this compared to Uncommon Oxford? Do we know?
I don't
Sort
know
of
that.
ground level, not the basements and all of that, but.
I mean, that's 5 stories. At Uncommon Oxford's 5 stories. So, you know, and this actually is probably, I don't know the exact dimension, how far back it is, but it is farther away from the street, I think, than Uncommon Oxford is.
Yeah, on the, I mean, this is site plan, I guess, but on this, it looks like it's
It's right up against it.
right up against it. That has a good bit of green space, so which is it?
Yeah, well, you would go off of the site plan that would actually show, you know, the full depth.
This isn't actually the site plan.
Yeah. Okay,
And that may be for the next one.
that's fine. Yeah, so you understand the description that Ben just gave? I think the main point that I wanted to,
About 15 feet back, I mean,
okay.
from that property line.
The main point I wanted to make sure about was that, one, we can't push them further back from the property line, and two, you get more step back in the facade from this design than would be required necessarily by the code.
The written, the material provided by the planning department indicates that there's not going to be any impact on the trees on that property. I don't see how that's possible. There's a large oak tree that's obviously going to be torn down, and another grove of trees that's near the intersection of Washington and Molly Bar, and I wonder if the tree board has commented about this.
Everything, as part of site plan review, they do look at the trees. I don't know the comment immediately, Ben or Robert.
Not that there wasn't an impact.
Yeah, I think,
There wasn't an impact, it just didn't.
No
require
mitigation was
any
required.
mitigation.
right, so there's a certain level of impact that triggers mitigation, and there's not enough trees on the site to require mitigation.
But all the trees are coming down, correct?
Is the applicant here? Yeah.
I'm Paul Castanino with Precision Engineering. I'm here representing the applicant, BRB LLC. And the gentleman had several questions, and some of these may be more applicable to the site plan approval, but specifically to the tree mitigation requirements, there are trees that are going to be cleared for the site. We've run the tree mitigation calculations as the Land Development Code requires, and ultimately there's no mitigation required for the site. We're retaining some trees on the northern portion of the site, but the bulk of the trees on the southern portion of the site will be removed. All the trees on the southern portion of the site will be removed. But again, it's complying with the Land Development Code.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, sir. Are there any additional comments or questions on this case? All right, is there a motion from the commission on the special exception for case number 2966?
I would move that we grant the special exception as provided in section 5,
All right.
6.1.2,
With staff conditions?
with staff conditions.
All right. I have a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. All in favor of approval? Any opposed? All right, the special exception is granted. Our next case is case number 2967, which is the site plan approval for the property Chelsea Lofts at the intersection of Molly Bar and Washington Avenue. Ben?
You bet. So the same piece of property, the same building design. The proposal includes a total of 39 dwelling units. These are 2 and 3 bedroom units. It's a total of 86 bedrooms. As I mentioned before, the ground floor will be used for parking. The use, it's an allowed use. It does require it's our staff's understanding that this is a residential common interest development, so it does require a special use for that, which has been filed with staff. So it would be effectively a condominium type of development. Total of 96 parking spaces are required for this development, and the application or the proposal does meet that requirement. The lot coverage requirements are 65% lot coverage for the area, and this site complies with that by a total of 64% coverage, so they're slightly under the maximum allowed. Building height, it does comply with the height requirement of 40 feet for this site. They do use average grade plane here, which is required because you have varied elevations. So the proposed building measures in at 39 feet 9 inches. As we mentioned, with the architectural type of materials, it's a mix of varied fronts along Molly Bar Road. The materials itself are a mix of brick and fiber cement panels with precast stone. There are balconies that are primarily made of steel. If you look along the Molly Bar elevation along the ground level, you do see some glass there that's spandrel glass. That's glass that's not transparent, so you can't necessarily see through it, so you wouldn't be able to see the parking along that. And you might remember the previous proposal where it did show, at the time it was like louvered panels. So they removed that and put glass there, which I think is it's a good addition there. Sidewalks and connectivity along Molly Bar Road and Washington Avenue do provide access to the building itself, and vehicular access is available at both Molly Bar and Washington. Landscaping, the proposed landscaping of this site does meet all of the standards and the requirements for frontage trees, parking trees, and foundation plantings. The tree mitigation, as we just discussed, is not required for this site because they're actually preserving more than enough to offset what they are taking out according to the calculations. Engineering did provide comments related to traffic and access, water and sewer, grading and stormwater, and staff recommends approval of the Chelsea Lofts development with the 7 conditions listed in your staff report.
Thank you, Ben. Are there questions from the commission? And then I'll come back to a few questions from Mr. Bogan. All right, well, I'll kick things off. The first question that Mr. Bogan had was about drainage. Right now, so the stormwater plan hasn't been final approved, but engineering didn't have any concerns about the approval. Paul, would you just clarify where the outlet of the underwater stormwater facility is going to be into a subsurface system along Molly Bar? Is that correct?
That's right. The subsurface detention system is very similar to what was approved during the original site plan approval under a separate applicant. This is the same type system, very common for Oxford. Subsurface pipe detention captures the site stormwater, releases it at a controlled rate in compliance with the City of Oxford's Land Development Code, and it is intended to tie to a storm drain inlet that's it's right on Molly Bar, just to the north of the proposed driveway access.
Okay, so it ties in subsurface and that flows south and then west, is that right?
South, yeah.
South, okay.
Well, west then south, I think.
Okay. And then Mr. Bogan pointed out that when school is in session, it's congested. I don't think in general there's a traffic problem there, but certainly during drop-off and pickup, there's a lot of congestion.
Sure. So the site does have 2 points of access, and during construction, I've already spoken with our client, Mr. Butler, and during construction, I think the intent is to really minimize any access off of Washington. I think all construction access in general, I mean, there may be few and far between times where they need to have some access off of Washington, but primarily they intend to access the site off of Molly Bar, and even during peak times in the mornings and the afternoons when school's dropping off and picking up, even once the project is complete and in service, there's always that available access off Molly Bar, so they can, during those bad times, they can avoid trying to contend with that congestion on Washington, because it's bad during mornings and afternoons.
And once construction started, I think my biggest concern is that the site is pretty tight. And so where is all the staging and vehicles for construction workers gonna be?
Right, so it is a tight site. You know, inherently, the way this project is gonna come together, the parking garage, or the retaining walls that essentially form the backside, the east side of the parking garage and the southern and east side, that will be essentially the first work that needs to occur, which will essentially create a large flat area on the site, which will be available for staging. The contractor, our client, Mr. Butler, he's also the builder, and they'll be securing off-site staging areas for materials, you know, everything from doors to toilets to materials of every sort. So, I mean, they'll be staging from the site, storing materials off-site at some undetermined location as of yet. But yeah, it's a tight site, but again, once that garage is started and the kind of the basic infrastructure of the garage is created, that'll prepare a very large, I mean, I think we're able to park 80 or so parking spaces under the building. So that'll be available for staging during construction.
So we won't have tradesmen parked down the roadway?
I think
Okay.
that would be specifically prohibited. And I'm sure the city would prohibit it, and I think our client would do the same.
Thank you. Ben, two related questions. One, does the city have any control over whether the condominiums are rental or buy? And if so, or if not, do you have any indication from the applicant about what the intentions are?
We do not. We do not have any control over it. We do, I guess the only control is if it's a common interest development, then they're required to come and get a special use for that. In some cases, a special exception. But if it's a rental development, we do not have any mechanism there to determine that. But it's our understanding that it's a condominium style or residential common interest development.
Right, yeah, the goal is to sell these as condominiums. I'm sure there'll be a lot of second home tenants that live here. But to Ben's point, you know, someone could buy one of these and rent it. I guess that's a possibility, but the intent is to sell these for owner occupied use.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Are there other questions from the commission? Are there any additional questions from the audience? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on case number 2967 for site plan approval for the property Chelsea Lofts at Molly Bar in Washington Avenue.
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions.
I have a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. All in favor of approval? Any opposed? All right, site plan is approved. Thank you, Paul. Our next case will be case number 2968. Joe Chrisman has filed a request for a special exception provided in section 2.6.7, traditional neighborhood business, first floor residential for property located at 3809 Old Sardis Road.
Yeah, this property is on the north side of Highway 314. It's near the George G. Patterson Parkway roundabout. It measures approximately 1.6 acres. It's zoned traditional neighborhood business, and the applicant's seeking a special exception for a residential neighborhood to be constructed here. According to the Land Development Code in a couple sections, ground floor residential may be approved in the TMB district when a development of more than 5 dwellings is proposed. Proposal indicates 14 three-bedroom, 2-story residential units. They're similar in size and scale to residential neighborhoods in the area, like Keystone Cottages, Greystone Point, Clearbrook, etc. 2 rows consisting of 7 units parallel Old Sardis Road, so the front doors actually are all facing towards Old Sardis Road. All units, they face that way. The development proposal has not been submitted for site plan review to the site plan review committee, but it does indicate in this instance 40 parking spaces. We believe that that would be sufficient parking according to our requirements. Engineering did provide comments related to access to the site. It's not typical that engineering provides comments related to a special exception. They usually find those inside of a site plan, but we thought that they were somewhat noteworthy, just related to that road that has been constructed that provides access to Pine Lake Road or Pine Lake Church. Currently, there's limited commercial opportunities in this area of Oxford. The closest retailer to the site is the Dollar General, located a mile from this site, followed by a neighborhood center at McElroy and 314. Staff opinion in the area is ripe for commercial opportunity, especially with N-Trade Park facility being so successful. This is also evidenced by several recently approved commercial developments near this site. It's also worth noting that the owner of this property, Evergreens 314 LLC, does own a considerable amount of property around the subject site, and much of that property is zoned neighborhood residential, which is a type of development that would be primarily, for this style of housing. Staff recommends denial of this request. The applicant's engineer is here and can speak to any comments that you might have.
Thank you, Ben.
You bet.
Questions from the commission?
So Ben, you're saying that there's neighboring properties that abut this that are zoned for residential?
Maybe that don't necessarily abut, but are in close proximity to this, that are zoned neighborhood residential, yes.
Additional questions?
Can you explain a little bit more about the road being built and that, kind of walk us through that?
Well, recently there's been a road that's been graded, and a drive. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but it's I think people are accessing it for Pine Lake Church. So typically we would see plans associated with some sort of a development or maybe a public road that we would evaluate. At this time, we've not. Staff has not seen anything. So we don't know too much about the road's intent, beyond what it is right now. I think that we've looked at and discussed with the developer of the property, the larger developer of the property, and in the past, there was kind of a master plan that was being used, and I think that there was, a lot of discussion about having adequate means of ingress and egress to this particular area, so that way not only could you develop the property in a way, so say some of these neighborhood residential areas, if they were to be developed as actual residential neighborhoods, that they could be platted as individual lots, that there was sufficient access for people to get in and out. If there are additional commercial developments that are constructed in the area, then they have ways to get in and out. So, there has been discussion at some point in the past of a need for more roads. We haven't really discussed this particular road.
And Ben, is the staff's concerned that there's limited commercial zoning and this would tie up commercial zoning with residential space when there's already residential zoning in the area?
That's correct, and it goes along with the philosophy of Vision 2037 of creating neighborhood centers, where there's, a mix of, commercial, retail, and services available to people in close proximity to where these neighborhoods are. So that way, at one point, many of the residents in Terra and some of those neighborhoods that are there, they had one way to get into town, and that was, College Hill Road to Old Sardis Road, and then if you had to go to Walmart, you had to get down to Jackson Avenue. Now we have more roads, but we're also trying to link additional services that are nearby that can help reduce traffic, provide more opportunities for people that are, visiting M-Trade Park, which there's so many teams there on a weekend and a weekly basis. Having restaurants and services available would be ideal.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
I don't know if Joey wants to make any comments.
Joey Moore, JM Engineering. Follow up a little bit on what Ben said. He's got a residential house there. He's trying to keep the same use. He's trying not to have to build that ground floor commercial that everybody in town keeps fighting. There is some residential land to the rear of this, but there is also a considerable amount of this zoning more, closer to M-Trade Park as well. That's, sites are available. But the owners, there's a residential house there, the neighbor's got a residential house there. That's what he's trying to put there. And I can speak a little bit to the road. There was an existing driveway where it was, he came to me and asked me if he could extend the road up to Pine Lake. We talked to MDOT, they seemed to be okay with it. We talked to the city said they did not want that road to be put there. So I informed him, do not put the road in there. So he was going to relay his driveway to the existing house, which was already there. But after looking at it, it seems like he took it too far to Pine Lake Road. But that's the road situation out there. But it's a gravel road. I got a call from MDOT on Friday. They were gonna call and discuss with them because it's their right of way. So they kind of have authority over there. So I have not heard back how that conversation went yet.
Excuse me, the plans included in here have the road in the same place though, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what's the discussion with the city? I mean, you said the city doesn't want it there, so.
Yeah, so we took that plan to the city. The city said, we don't want the road going to Pine Lake there. So we were kind of done with it. And the developer said, well, I still want to try to get the ground floor commercial removed from this piece and do these units. And, we can stop that road, no problem. But that was the layout we came with at the city, and it just didn't get revised for that road to be taken off, so, for the special exception.
Okay. Is there a plan for this road to service additional development?
Not that I'm aware of. The only piece that I could possibly think of, if it doesn't go to Pine Lake, would be the property to the east, but I haven't had any discussions about that piece at all. I don't even know if he owns that piece, actually.
Additional discussion or questions?
Where is, you're saying there's an existing house on here?
Yes, there is.
Where is it?
It's kind of in the center of the lot, and there's a barn in the west side. There's no aerial map on there, I'm guessing, either. It's the old Apple house. I don't know. I always know it because I drive by. There's a mailbox with an apple on it sitting right there.
So he built the road on the side of his house, unlike.
There was an existing driveway going to that house,
Okay, I see the existing driveway.
and that's where the road is now.
Okay.
Or as he's calling it, his driveway to his existing house.
Where does it connect to?
But does it actually connect to that?
I haven't gone up there and looked at it. I know the city went out there and looked at it. I don't know if it actually goes all the way to Pine Lake or not.
Okay.
It does.
It does, okay.
And it was actually, when he sold the property to Pine Lake, he told them he would give them that second access road.
Okay,
Why they didn't put that in the paperwork?
Okay.
I mean, that's
okay.
actually.
That's new, okay. And excuse me for not knowing all the history. I had another engineer out there at the time, and he's kind of brought me in trying to get it back going for him.
When Rihanna's joining us virtually, and I know I was in one meeting, related to this. I don't necessarily know that the city's opposed to the road being there. I just think that she may want to comment on that.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
thank you. Commissioner, can I speak? Is it okay? I apologize, there's a slight delay, and so I don't want to overspeak it over anyone.
Go ahead, Rianne.
Thank you. So I want to address the road. When we met with Joey, we asked him specifically, is this road that he was planning, is this the road that was proposed to go and connect, according to the master plan, to hundreds of homes in the rear of this property? There is a large plan for all of this area, and it connects over to Dillon by the Methodist Church. It goes all the way back to the Parkway for hundreds of homes in this master development. And so we asked, is this the road that's going to go to the north and connect to all of this? He said he didn't know, and then I think there was a discussion that maybe that road was supposed to be immediately adjacent at the property line to this road. we discussed with him that we would like to see where this road fit in with everything else, because as it's designed, it's not the way it comes into the back of Pine Lake. It doesn't make sense for a future city street. It doesn't make sense for it to be a connector road going into a large residential development. The way it came into that back parking lot, it did not make sense. And we also did not want two big roads side by side, and we don't believe MDOT would approve that. And we discussed that. He said that he had gotten approval for MDOT for this road, and I specifically asked, is MDOT aware that this road would connect and go to all of the rest of the development? And I believe he said that he was not aware of that, and therefore I think MDOT was not aware. But I just want to say, we were not opposed to this. We never said we were opposed to this specific road. What we asked were a lot of questions, because we want to make sure, as we're looking at this site plan, that something's not being designed and approved that then makes it more difficult for our connectivity, for roads, and we just feel like we've already seen a plan for all of this property, and this doesn't fit in as far as what we could understand. So it's not that we said we didn't like this road, it is that we said we wanted more information, and that's what we requested, was more information about how this road fits in the plan, where it ties in relative to that. And we also did specifically say that MDOT would need to know about all of the units or houses that would be tying in because of the proximity to the roundabout. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Rand.
And she's correct. There is another road that I've been told that will be planned that goes to whatever that road is that by Head Start. That will be the main entrance. So,
Okay.
I think the road, we can do whatever with this road. It doesn't have to connect, doesn't have to do anything. I think he's just trying to, I don't think he's going to move forward unless he can get, the ground floor commercial taken off. So we haven't pushed anything as far as site design goes until we get that answer.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? Anyone from the audience? All right. Yes, sir.
We don't have anything in writing, but we did receive a phone call earlier today from Kathy Field, and she was in objection of this request, I believe due to the traffic, the concerns of traffic on 314 that this might cause.
Okay. Will that be recorded in the final?
Yeah, I think we're putting it into the record as part of that discussion, and so I think the minutes will have to reflect that since we don't have anything in writing.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion on the traffic? All right. Is there a motion on case number 2968 for the special exception for first floor residential for property located at 3809 Old Sardis Road?
I'll make a motion to deny the request.
I have a motion to deny. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of denial? All right. The special exception is denied.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next case is case number 2969. Oxford Farms has filed for preliminary plat approval for Oxford Farms Phase 10 property located at Oxford Way west of the archive. Robert? Yeah, let's go ahead and look at case number 2970 as well, which is the preliminary plat for Phase 11.
Okay, so for Phase 10, subject property is about 12 acres northwest of the roundabout on Oxford Way and is the site of the reserve at Oxford Farms, which is a later case, but y'all heard special exceptions about that, I believe, last month. Phase 10 will be a single lot subdivision to facilitate that phase of Oxford Farms. And that single lot does meet the dimensional requirements for the underlying zoning. Tree mitigation for Phase 10 was pretty well addressed in kind of two separate phases. A little bit more specifics are in the case report for the reserve, but the southern half of that was previously cleared and the northern half of that was cleared with preparation for the road that will be coming north out of the roundabout. They're essentially being offset by other areas that are left over in what we'll come to in phase 11. Engineering does have some concerns. First is about phase numbering, roads and access, stormwater, and grading. For phase 10, we do recommend approval of the preliminary plat with the 6 conditions that are listed. And on to phase 11, which is the neighboring property to the east. This kind of is on the northeast section of the roundabout on Oxford Way and wraps to the north of the archive. It is 57.66 acres, and again, is going to be a single lot subdivision to facilitate a future project at some point in the future. Again, same thing with tree mitigation, and again, same concerns from engineering department with, and staff does recommend approval with the 6 conditions that are listed in the staff report. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. Before we discuss it, Brianna, since there are several concerns from engineering, could you summarize those concerns and maybe point out the ones that you think are the most troubling, whether these are just minor technical corrections or if there's things that concern engineering about approving the plat at this time?
Yes, summarizing is not always my strong point, but I will try. I think for the most part, what we have are items that can be addressed and corrected as it moves forward. The 2 big issues are the lack of documents regarding the regional detention pond. There's some more documents that we need to iron down the maintenance and the responsibility, and we need those. And then the other part is regarding the grading, and this is really, it really goes more probably to the building department than an engineering issue, but because we are considering the plat now, I feel like it's important for the commission to have an opportunity to be aware and just to kind of get this tightened back up, is that as this site has been graded at some point in time, the vegetative cover has not been established or has not remained established. And so I think that as part of this approval, that needs to be taken care of. Typically when we're approving plat, it's to begin grading. And so we have erosion control measures put in place, grassing and all of those things. This has all been graded previously. And so I think that's an issue. And then I do think the phase numbers, because of this duplicate, I think it's very confusing, and it was very difficult just trying to work through the history of this specific area. And it's all been it's been done during my time period with the city, but I've still had a difficult time trying to track down the history and to see that this area had already been platted. So I do think the phase numbers are an issue. I think honestly, there could be a different phase number with the final plat in the future. That would, I don't know if that'd make it more confusing or less confusing, but anyway, there are issues with that, and that this area's already been platted. So,
okay.
But I think planning has established a way to work through that part of it. We were just calling attention to it so that we don't have duplication.
All right. And all of those are addressed in the staff conditions, correct? Except maybe the phase numbering?
Yes, everything except for the phase numbering.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, I think the planning and council would have to discuss if there are options or what could be an option for that. I think I've discussed with planning that I do think that the design engineer needs to give us an overall correct and current phasing map that shows the complete history, so that we have, what he believes everything is numbered as, and so that we have, as he's moving forward, how these things are numbered. But again, I don't know that that's it's not listed as a condition. That's just something we've been discussing about getting this corrected.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. So I would say, Joey, there's no requirement on the phase numbering. I mean, that's not something that the city, I think, can really get into, but might help you expedite things if y'all can help.
Sure,
provide
sure.
some sort
And
of
I'll
crosswalk on that.
call the surveyor in the morning and get him back on it. And
Sure,
I think
sure.
there was, the problem was is that they had that plat done back with that site plan. The site plan never got approved, and like, surveyor forgot about it. Mr. Calicut forgot about it. Nobody knew that phase
Right.
got approved by the board. It was never filed because you went in the tax system and it wasn't anywhere to be found. So we'll get all that worked out to where it's easier on everybody to move forward.
Other questions?
All right, trying to see, are we just doing 69 and 70?
Yes.
Okay. I'll hold my question.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission or anyone from the audience wish to speak on the plats for phase 10 and phase 11? All right, is there a motion on case number 2969, the preliminary plat for phase 10?
Motion to approve, subject to staff conditions.
I have a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions. Is there a second?
No, second.
So, I'm sorry, I gotta ask a question about this
Okay.
before we vote on it. But there's an issue in one of the later cases about this Nicole Road and the parking. And if we approve this plat, but have issues with the parking, have we pigeonholed ourselves into accepting the location of Nicole Lane
So
on
that,
this?
so you might need to clarify the question. So there were a couple of issues on Nicole Lane. One of them was the intended path for Nicole Lane, right?
Well,
And
but
one of
my
them
main
was
concern is the parking along both sides of the street
Right.
and having the safety issue with that. And at this point, this land is a big blank canvas. And so if we approve the plat as is with where the location of Nicole Lane is, are we stuck with that versus if there's a way to move Nicole Lane 20 feet one way or the other that provides him with enough room to put the parking where it's not on the street? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I guess, I think I understand now. What I was gonna say is that we're not approving a road section with the plat, so.
But we're approving the plat as
Right.
where it's located. Once we approve that, the road it's on the plat.
It's a preliminary plat though. That's why we didn't ask for both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the right of way is still 50 foot, whether or not you have that parking on there or
Okay.
not. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
good with it.
But we did, that's what I asked them before we submitted. I was like, oh, this road can move, so I wanted to get the preliminary, where it's, in that section in front of development, it's pretty much set.
Right.
Where it curves there towards the end, when we get towards the hospital property, that's what's in, that's why we kind of stopped the road at the end of this development, give us some flexibility of how we make that curve towards the end, so. When we get all that settled, we'll come back and ask for the final.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you.
That's staff condition one. What is that? Is that a typo in there? I don't even understand what it's saying.
So, Ben, can you go through the previous plat that was approved but never filed? briefly.
Yeah, the previous plat that was filed for Oxford Farms Phase 9, that was associated with the Aspen Heights development. That process will have to go through basically to vacate that plat, that subdivision. So that will have to go back before the Mayor and Board of Aldermen, likely at a future meeting, maybe the next meeting, to make that request. I don't know, how they'll act on it, but I think that that's why there's that condition that's in there.
Okay. Makes sense now.
Gotcha. All right. Commissioner Spraggins, are you still good with your motion?
Yes.
And Commissioner Milam, are you good with your second? Okay.
Give me a second.
All right. Oh, sorry. Would you have? Oh, sorry.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Give it to Harry.
Either way. Commissioner Alexander, second. All right. All in favor of approval? Okay. That was case number 2969. Is there a motion on case number 2970 for phase 11?
Make a motion to approve subject to staff conditions.
There's a motion to approve subject to staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of approval? All right. That brings us to case number 2971. Oxford Farms LLC is filed for a site plan approval for the reserve property located at Oxford Way, west of the archive.
Okay, so this is the Phase 10 property, 12.1 acres, mostly zoned neighborhood residential with the southwest corner, about 3/4 of an acre being zoned TNB. Applicant is proposing to construct a housing development, which would be similar in style to the Stillwater development, with 68 attached and 28 detached units. As for use requirements, the use of detached dwellings and neighborhood residential is a special exception when proposed with more than 3 bedrooms, and the use of ground floor residential and TNB districts requires a special exception. And the applicant received approval for both of those requests at the May meeting. Parking for detached 4-bedroom units is calculated. Okay, I'm not going to go through the entire thing. The applicant is providing 237 spaces, which will be more than enough for the residential that are there, and provide a few extra for the pool that is going to go with us. For landscaping, package is included that shows street trees, foundation plantings, parking lot trees, and perimeter landscaping that all meet the land development requirements. Tree mitigation, we kind of went through that, is handled kind of in a 2-part phase. The lower half was previously cleared. The northern half was cleared with the road, with the remainder of trees being left with phase 11. And when additional work is done in phase 11, they'll come back, update that tree mitigation calculation. Building architecture will be similar to other phases of Oxford Farms. Detached and attached residential structures will be similar to the Stillwater development. Exterior materials will be a combination of hardy plank siding and painted brick veneer with asphalt shingle roofing. And the multifamily building will have fiber cement lap and board and batten siding with brick and veneer with architectural asphalt shingle roofing. Engineering has provided comments related to access and streets, water and sewer, and I believe stormwater. Yes, and stormwater. Staff recommends approval of the requested site plan for the reserve at Oxford Farms with the 7 conditions. Of note, condition number 3 is a request that the Planning Commission will specify the street type to be applied, whether on-street parking is permitted or not, and the construction plans will then be updated as necessary to reflect all necessary changes associated with the approved street type. And Joey's here if you all have questions from him.
Thank you, Robert.
Robert, what's our alternative on the street type? I mean, if we approve it but deny the on-street parking, what's that? What's that an option?
That's what we consider that a local road right then. Probably narrow the overall width of the road down a little bit, but the travel lane should stay, I believe, the same as it's currently shown.
The travel lane is the same, but I mean, do you have sufficient parking without having the parking on the street?
If we're
counting.
You were not counting any though.
I'm not counting those on-street.
Yeah, none of that street
Okay.
is counted
So
towards.
he's just trying to match what he's got, the entrance to Oxford Way is out in Harbor, we've got some off-street parking, that's what it means.
The hope, there is a bit that roundabout should all be commercial except for that one corner as part of this. There may be a desire from the commission to have on-street parking associated with that commercial element.
I know, I mean, my concern is that somebody's parked on the other side of the street, you get out of the car and, you know, they get hit. I mean, I guess that's, could happen around the square too, but, you know, the speed limit's, you know, higher here, I assume, but, you know, we don't know, but it's my concern. It seems like it's a risk without any real benefit.
Additional comments? Questions? Any other thoughts on the parking? We do have a charge in condition number 3 to say one way or the other.
So why, if he doesn't need the on-street parking, why does he want the on-street parking?
I think it was consistency with the rest of the,
That's right, and guest spaces to be in the front door instead of the rear, because the fronts are facing the road, and they're right up on the road. There's gonna be, I think too far down the road, but it'll kind of look the same on the other side of the street when it's all said and done, so that's what.
Okay, that's another question that I had.
That's helpful.
That I asked Ben about today. Cause this to me is starting to feel like we're just all over the place all the time with it. And I'm sure y'all have a grand plan for this whole thing in your mind of some form.
It changes.
And maybe planning has seen it, and maybe we've seen it and I forgot. But, that would be helpful to know, like, what
Sure.
do you think is gonna happen across the street from it?
It's zoned residential. I would suspect, we're working on it right now, it'll look very similar to this. So right now, what I have laid out right now is we have houses facing the street that mirror this down this road. And then behind it, we've got a mixture of detached and attached units that are really similar to this.
Okay,
So
so you're calling these houses, these aren't houses, these are attached,
they're detached along the road.
okay,
But they're detached condos.
Yeah.
but they're attached condos that I'm looking at, maybe I haven't.
In the back, yeah.
Oh, I haven't looked at those, but.
Yeah,
These are fourplexes
it's
that I'm looking
Stillwater.
at.
It's the Stillwater plans as well.
So the idea is not for the people that are parking across the road to go to be crossing the road. The idea is that you would have the same thing on that side and the people would go to that side.
That's right.
I don't have as much problem with that. I was thinking,
And there's no, we're not allowed to do what engineering would call a mid-block crossing, which is to put a crosswalk in the middle of, just that, somewhere in the middle of that road going down it. You would have to put a stop sign or something like that, which we have no plans on doing. So there would be no legal pedestrian access to cross there. Now, maybe when we get up towards the northern entrance, I don't think we're gonna put a stop sign there. So I don't think you're gonna have, I think you have to walk down to the roundabout and cross if that's what you were gonna do.
and where is Nicole Lane gonna go ultimately?
goes to the
To
back.
Nicole Lane. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you said you wanted some freedom to determine
right-
the route,
right now
but is the
we're-
destination ultimately no?
To go north through the hospital, wrap around, there's a TVA power plant there.
Yeah,
And the Nicole Lane is on the north side of Belk right there.
okay.
So, not to get too much into that, but when the city just let the hospital put it there, the hospitals gave them a 50-foot easement to put a road that goes through here. We are fighting that location, not fighting, we are discussing that location because it's not wide enough with that terrain to get that road in there.
Sure.
So, Mr. Calcutt is in discussions with them, the city's in discussions with them right now about seeing if we can't kind of relocate that 50-foot easement they gave the city to
Yeah.
come through there.
The only reason I ask is that this road is gonna be a conduit to Belk and to
Correct.
Old Taylor. It's not just gonna be to other houses.
Yes, and that everything that's owned on the other side of the hospital is institutional medical, so I don't know what
Right.
they have planned over there, but.
Yeah.
Hey, Joey, can you confirm on the road, on the, I guess it's the west side of the road, it's a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and is there a multi-use path that's on the east side of that road?
There is on our piece. Now, when we get to the hospital piece, it's not wide enough to build it. So that's kind of that's the discussions that we're in the middle of right now. So Andy, we'll take our pedestrian access to as far as I guess it makes sense. What I mean by that is, I don't know if we take it all the way down to the ditch, if there's not gonna be one on the hospital side. Maybe we take it to the end of this development or wherever we stop on the east side, I don't know. But it'll go and we'll make sure it's on our side, on our piece. I don't know how. But we can stop it wherever the city would like. I'll say that.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on the site plan approval for the reserve property located Oxford Way west of the archive, and please include in your motion a recommendation for the road section. Yeah.
One quick question, quick follow-up, I guess. And it's just to save time for trying to find it in here. Are there streetlights as part of this project?
He will put in the same ones that are along Oxford Way, which I don't think are the decorative ones. I'll have to go back and see which one he's got. But we usually go to the electric department, they lay them out where they want them, and then, yeah, they'll be down the road, yeah.
I would think the parking issue about the cross the street and all that stuff would kind of be alleviated if there was lighting, so you would
Okay.
see people
Okay.
crossing the road. or
Yeah, that's a good point,
crossing
yeah.
Yeah, here's my motion. I will make the motion to approve with the road and parking as is, subject to approval of development on what's the other side of the road?
East side.
East side, subject to approval of a site plan for the east side of the road. And if they don't get that approved, then no parking on the east side. This is as good as I can make.
So let me read your motion and then maybe clarify a couple things. So the motion is to approve the site plan with the parking along Nicole Lane as it's indicated, subject to approval of development on the east side of Nicole Lane. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So question, is all of Nicole Lane within this property?
Well, the Cole Lane will be dedicated city right of way.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is, does it make sense to include the parking on the east side of the street in this, rather than withholding it for the development on the east side?
I don't know if it does because I don't have a timing on the east side. I'm working on it. We plan to submit here in probably the next couple of months. But, I hope that doesn't hold anything up. But no, it's just gonna be a separate piece. All that parking will be in the city right away. So I guess it'll be for the city to determine. But I don't have an issue waiting, but it's a large development on the east side.
I guess I'm giving you a chance to speak on whether that you want this site plan held up until the next site plan is approved.
If I had a choice, I would say no. But it's just because of the timing. That's all.
Yeah.
He's got that road. It's a TIF approved project. He was 8 years on the TIF, and now we're down to 6 and some change. So he's in a hurry to get it built so he can start getting the tax incentive, money back. So it might incentivize him to build the east property because that's included in the TIF as well. The more he builds, the quicker he'll get it back.
All right. All right, does everybody understand the motion? The motion is to approve the site plan with the parking as shown subject to approval of the planned development on the east side of Nicole Lane.
In addition to the staff conditions.
In addition to that, yeah, yeah.
So what if he said, okay, never mind, I don't want street parking anymore, can I just go ahead and build it?
Then he'd have to
No,
come
you have
back.
to come back for site plan approval.
I second.
All right. There is a second.
I think we need to specify what approval that he needs.
Approval of, yeah, what does approval of development mean?
Approval, I saw it says approval of site plan.
Okay.
Site plan approval, site plan approval, that he said.
Okay. All right. Approve with the parking as shown, subject to approval of site plan on the east side of Nicole Lane. Seconded by Alexander still? Yes. All in favor? I'm sorry.
Do we need to give the option, I mean, instead of locking him in on this, I mean, if he wants to
No,
withdraw?
there's a motion and a second now. I think we need to vote on the motion and then,
Okay.
yeah. All right. All in favor of the motion as stated? All opposed? All right, the motion passes.
Yeah, he can come back. All he gotta do is flip this thing.
All right, the adventure continues with case number 2972. Calicut Land LLC has filed a special exception as provided in section 2.6.7, building height for property located at 1105 North Lamar Boulevard.
Okay, y'all heard this case back in February about the North Lamar storage. This is the property due south of the Dollar General up on North Lamar. It's about 1.14 acres, zone TNB. Site has a very steep drop in elevation from east to west. And applicant was previously approved for a 3-story storage facility with office space and a single basement. Applicant has returned to the request of the ability to add another basement. A site plan amendment has been received and is the next case. Due to how the grading has to work for the site, this is going to change the average grade plane of the entire building to increase it over 40 feet to 47 foot 7 inch, which is going to necessitate that 4-story 50 foot provision of the height special exception. Essentially, the rear of the building will have an additional 10.5 feet of visible building facade at the west corner, which is where most of that height differential comes from, and a lot of that is where where the retaining wall was hiding a lot of that height differential down the slope. For the most part, this isn't going to change anything with how this looks towards North Lamar. They're taking the building and essentially dropping another basement into it. This is going to affect the rear of the building. Applicant states that this would keep the harmony of the neighborhood as it will match the previously approved site plan from the street. Again, previously a large retaining wall was located at the rear of the building to accommodate the existing terrain. By adding another level below, the retaining wall will reduce in height. All other aspects of the site, including front building height, parking, stormwater detention, will remain the same as previously approved. It's staff's opinion that because very little with the building will change, especially with the front facade, that this is a reasonable request. Staff recommends approval of the requested special exception with the finding that the requested increase in floors and feet will not adversely affect the public interested, with a condition that it's for the plan to submit it subject to necessary revisions per the site plan review committee.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions or comments from the commission?
Have we heard anything from the rear neighbors?
What would be the height from the street?
Gary. 2 seconds.
In stories?
41 feet, yes.
41?
That's to the parapet.
Yeah, that's in the top.
Yeah. Should be, is that the 44-foot measurement? Yeah, so 33-ish feet.
So,
It's 52.
So they start from the basement, so there's
From
11.
the street,
If you're on the street, to the top of the roof line is going to be 33. To the top of the parapet will be 40-ish feet. Yeah.
so Joey, can you explain like what, I still don't know that I fully understand what happened and why we're doing this.
So we originally had a 3-story building with a basement.
Right.
So in the back of that building, what you had is you had that basement. We were still not down to grade.
Okay.
So you had a stem wall that was holding up the building. And then 10 feet from that, you had a 12-foot retaining wall. So the building, the rear of the building was still way up in the air. So, and to be honest, adding a double basement never crossed any of our minds. And so we went forward with the 3 in the basement. When the architect started looking at it, he said, hey, we've got this stem wall here. Why don't we just add another story that would still count as a basement according to the rules, which means that's mostly covered with ground. We could get rid of the stem wall and lower that retaining wall in the back. And so we talked to the fire department, and we talked to planning and the building department, and they were like, yeah, we don't see a problem with adding a double basement. So the idea kind of came after the architect was designing the structural part of it, and that's where we're at. But from the front, from North Lamar, the building will look identical to what you're seeing, and really in the back it'll look identical, except for instead of a stem wall, you'll have a basement with windows and then a smaller retaining wall in the back. But the site drops off so much that we had that height to make up if we could.
So it'd be like 2 full basements, the length and width of the building?
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually gonna be this orangey brick and this weird pattern on top?
That's my picture. I think the one that Ben put in there in the
I
back
buy that several times a day.
is this is the one that the architect sent over. So I mean, maybe they painted a different color if you guys want. I don't know. I don't see Andy leaving that as orange, but that could. I mean,
Very 70s.
yeah. You know, we could paint that Dollar General yellow, you know, and next door and all that. You know?
Consistency in the neighborhood. Yeah. All right. Any other questions on 2973? All right. Is there a motion on case number, 2972, the special exception for the building height for property at 1105 North Lamar?
Motion to approve, subject to the staff condition.
I have a motion to approve, subject to the staff condition. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right. That brings us to the site plan amendment for the same property, case number 2973, site plan amendment for North Lamar Storage at 1105 North Lamar Boulevard.
Okay. So just going through the use requirements. They all approved the use of the storage facility in June of '22. The parking is fine per a planning director's reduction in February of this year. Landscaping. So proposed site includes foundation plantings along the front and edge, landscaping around the sides of the building. The rear of the building requires a 50-foot buffer as it abuts an area zone primarily for residential. There are frontage trees proposed and they comply with the regulations of the Land Development Code. Parking lot trees are going to need to be replaced because lacebark elms are no longer a recommended species for parking lot trees. So during site work from the previous approval, the buffer was cleared of pretty much every piece of vegetation. A year-round visual screen is especially needed at this location due to the height differential between the buildings and the residences to the west. The landscaping plan shows trees and shrubs that would provide some coverage in the buffer, though most of the species selected are deciduous and generally slow growing. A mix of more evergreen plantings as well as those that will provide height and screening are needed. Though staff recognizes that you're not going to be able to do a whole lot to screen a building that's tall point is going to be 75 feet at a minimum from the neighboring residences. We need something that's going to be, fairly fast growing, is going to provide that year-round screening at that location. And we just don't have that on plan right now. The proposed building includes 4 stories with the basement, and you'll just approve that special exception. Building materials are pretty much what y'all approved last time. Engineering has pretty much the same comments from before for water, sewer access, retaining walls, and sidewalk, and some updates to the stormwater management plan. Staff recommends approval of the requested site plan amendment for the North Lamar Storage Building with the 5 conditions that are listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Robert. Questions from the commission?
I've got one for engineering. There was a lot of question about temporary stormwater management, and my question is really about, I guess, permanent stormwater management, and I don't know that I fully understand the symbols on there, but it looks like there's an outlet that just kind of dumps it off the back hill. Where does it go from there? And that can be Joe.
Yeah, there's a ditch that runs between our building and the property, so basically on the property lines between us. So it's going down to that ditch and then going down to the west, down Cherokee Hill, somewhere down through there. But yeah, we're, staying off the property line or 40 feet. So the deal with the temporary is that we have underground detention, and this building is, this site is all building. Yeah. So it's basically everything that falls on the roof. So we can't really detain anything until we get that roof built. So the question is, what do we do during construction? So we've worked with engineering, a lot over the last few months, and we've come up with a temporary pond that we're going to construct on the southwest portion of the site. We're going to build that temporary pond, get all the water into that pond during construction, and then once we get the site up, as the building's going up, we can put in the permanent pond, which is on the north side underground, and then we can tie in the roof to it. But the question is, what do you do with that double basement? Because that's going to be concrete at one point in time, there's going to be no roof on it. So from that double basement with no roof, it'll go into the temporary pond that we use during construction. And then at the end of the day, final detention, we'll get rid of that temporary pond. But with that building being the way it is, there's nothing you can do, even until you get to the 4th level. You got to get that roof built and tied into the permanent system.
But I guess is anybody taking a look to see whether or not that ditch is sufficient to handle? I got no idea.
Sure, it's a pretty good sized ditch. I'll say this, all the water's going there now. We'll be letting out less than what's there now. Okay. At the end of the day. I know they're having issues downstream, so we're doing,
right.
All I'll be able to tell them is that we're letting out less water than what was there previously. So issues that were pre-existing, we're not hurting that. If anything, we're helping it.
Okay.
Is there a buffer on the backside there?
There is a 50-foot buffer that we will be replanting.
What's the plan as far as, if that's part of the existing ditch and everything else, and you're worried about erosion, you'll talk through all that, how that's going to affect once you clear the vegetation?
So the vegetation has been cleared from the previous site plan. So the ditch is, I say this, it's the property lines on it, it's actually on the neighbor's property. It's probably 3 or 4 feet off into the neighbor's property. So the ditch hasn't been touched as far as clearing or anything like that. The owner got in there when they were tearing down the house. I don't know if there was a mix-up or whatever, but there's a bunch of trash in there, large pieces of concrete. There might be a car in there somewhere. So they were trying to get some of this stuff out, and the buffer, it is a city-established buffer. It was pretty thin, and I think the guy on the track was like, I'm gonna get that out, and, cleared more than what he was supposed to do. So we're gonna replant, we're gonna reestablish, it's gonna be a nicer buffer than was there originally. There wasn't much there, probably some, you know, briar patches and a few 1 or 2 inch trees or something like that. But, so we'll have to reestablish that. You know, we've got rows of silt fence up there. Everybody out there right now is very well aware of the situation going on downstream. So every day it's, before you leave the site, it's check, make sure everything's good to go, because, you know, what happened yesterday could happen again tonight, you know, with the much rain as we got in that short period of time.
So the buffer was cleared. Ben, am I right that typically the buffer is sacrosanct once development's approved, right?
Yeah, unless the site plan reflects any sort of work to be done, like a retaining wall's allowed to be constructed there, and sometimes you have, a utility that has to go through a buffer, but generally that's noted on the site plan and you would review that ahead of time. So, but ordinarily, work doesn't come inside the buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, is this a city-maintained ditch? I use the word ditch. Drainage ditch, or is this?
Yeah, I default to
No.
Rhiannon on that.
No?
It is not.
No.
So who's
It is not
responsible?
a city-maintained ditch.
Who's responsible for maintenance? The bordering landowner?
The property owners. I'm not sure if the ditch is the property line or if the ditch is on a particular owner's property, but it is not a city-owned ditch at all.
I'm going to come back to the buffer
Okay.
for one reason, which is that oftentimes when we're discussing these projects with the community, we lean on the fact that the city requires a buffer, right? And we promise the surrounding landowners that there's going to be a buffer, the developer's not allowed to touch it, and we need that integrity of the process, right? And so I realize things happen, and there may have been the best of intentions, but in order to maintain the integrity of the process, I think we need to put some emphasis on maintaining the buffer.
Great.
So, I mean, I think in this case, it's pretty clear cut. I'd like for the code enforcement officer to go out there and evaluate whether a citation's in order and issue one if so.
Okay.
Well, when you say, I mean, I believe you that it will be a better buffer, but when in 40 years, I mean,
Yeah.
when they grow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for that neighborhood, this is a really big building to be looking at
Sure,
for that
sure.
neighborhood. We all know that.
Yeah, and there's comments in the report about trying to put in some evergreens to make sure that there's buffering year-round.
Yeah.
You'll be working with staff on that plan?
Yes, I missed that one. We redid the landscape plan and resubmitted it, but they added a bunch more, but I guess it wasn't the evergreen, so I will get with the landscape architect and we'll get that correct.
Okay, appreciate that. Any other questions for the applicant or comments? All right. Anyone from the audience, such as it is? All right. Is there a motion on case number 2973 for site plan amendment for North Lamar Storage? You have a question? Go ahead.
Rana, are you still there?
I am.
How much have you looked at this stormwater management plan? I mean, have the calculations and whatnot been done to make sure that the temporary pond is gonna suffice?
So Steve Brunton has been through this plan. He's the most thorough engineer that I know, which says a lot because engineers are notorious for being thorough. He has been through it extensively. It's not approved in its final form yet, but they are down to the technical weeds, is my understanding. And the temporary pond is, it's not required to meet the 100-year storm event. It is a temporary measure, according to our ordinance, that requires temporary detention until the complete detention system is built.
Does that answer your question?
I would just add that, and as long as it's been looked at as far as calculations and the timeline of the construction, as long as engineering's comfortable with it, I see the fifth, line item here for the staff conditions. So as long as that's what you're saying, that's all that I was asking about. So.
Joey, do you have an idea of the timeline for construction? Well, I mean, the duration.
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that one on South Lamar is still going.
Yeah.
Miles Mountain's been going, but it's similar to that.
Yeah,
It's been 2 years or something like that.
all right. Additional questions? All right, is there a motion on case number 2973?
I would move that we grant the approval of the requested site plan amendment with the 5 conditions.
All right, there's a motion to approve with staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of approval? Any opposed? All right. It is approved. That brings us to case number 2974. The City of Oxford has requested a special exception that's provided in section 5.6.1.8, appropriate, inappropriate facade for property located at 717 Molly Bar. Okay.
Good evening. We're talking about a new building to be built on the city shop property. As you guys know, metal siding can be requested by special exception. There are existing metal buildings on site. We included a bunch of photos of what's on site in the applications. This building is going to be utilitarian in nature. It's just storage for, there's going to be a couple of enclosed bays that are for pieces of equipment that cannot withstand a freeze. And then the open bays are going to be to hold various pipes and things that currently I think are not housed in a building. Staff is recommending approval of the special exception due to the location of the building on the site. It's not going to be visible from Molly Bar or McElroy, and due to the fact that it is, a utilitarian building for storage. And staff finds that granting the special exception would not harm the public interest. And then we'll also cover the site plan amendment for this building in the next case.
Thank you, Kate. Questions for staff or for the applicant? All right. Would the applicant like to speak? Is there a motion on case number 2974?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor? All right, it's approved. Takes us to case number 2975, request for site plan amendment for the city shop located at 717 Molly.
Okay, so the new building will be around 4,200 square feet, and as I mentioned in the previous case, it'll consist of 5 bays, 2 that are enclosed and heated, that'll be accessed through roll-up doors, and then 3 open bays. The lot coverage is proposed to be at 54%, which is well within the 80% allowed in an institutional government zoning, which this space is zoned. The proposed new building will sit outside of the required 50-foot buffer from Davidson Creek, which runs behind the shop. As I noted in the staff report, the building will be subject to bid procurement, and so the final building may differ from what's shown. If I had to guess, if it does differ from what's proposed, it would be smaller due to the bids going out. But if there is a significant change to the site plan that requires an amendment, this case will be brought back to the Planning Commission. Engineering provided comment on sewer and water access and stormwater management. And so staff is recommending approval of the site plan amendment with the conditioned that the approval is for the site plan is submitted with necessary corrections per the site plan review committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or maybe Mark can answer some questions if you guys have any.
Thank you. Questions? All right. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion on case number 2975.
Motion to approve, subject to the staff condition.
Motion to approve, subject to the staff condition. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor? All right. It is approved. That brings us, thank you.
Thanks for protecting the vacuum truck.
Our final case for the evening is case number 2976, the best for last. The City of Oxford has filed a request for modifications to the Land Development Code.
Thank you. Yes, we're proposing several modifications to the Land Development Code. We'll take the daycare facilities first, and we'll get into that. So as y'all might recall, we've had at least one fairly recent case related to a daycare facility where it required a variance, maybe several variances, but one of the variances was just the size limitation that's required for daycare. It requires three acres, which is a very large daycare facility, or a very small building on a very large piece of property for a daycare. The only thing that we can really rationalize at this point is that was part of like larger nursing home care facilities, that mentality that you probably need a larger area of property associated with that. But we certainly do need more daycare facilities in Oxford. I think we can, many of us can appreciate that. With Oxford growing and having a lot more families that are coming here, and it seems that all of our facilities have wait lists, and so there's always a need. So we've evaluated the standards that would be required specifically for a daycare facility, and we teased them out, separated within where it's currently regulated, separated it out though as a daycare facility, put in the specific requirements and the locations of where those would be allowed. You'll see some of the standards, many of the standards have been reworked, but you no longer see that 3-acre requirement associated with it. You do have some time limits for outdoor activities. Space requirements is stipulated by the Department of Health, which they currently regulate that. So we just think it's a good move to go ahead and make those modifications to at least make it easier to have a daycare facility. I mean, a lot of times we see daycare facilities in as like a second life of an existing building, and certainly I think that this would enable more opportunity there for that use.
I guess the question, I think one of the issues with that daycare facility was like the queuing for drop off and pickup. Isn't that kind of hard for a lot of existing structures? I mean, if you make them put a whole loop and say that, it's got I know it's determined by the city engineer, but, how many cars do you got to be able to queue at a time?
I mean, I think you have to evaluate it based on the, how many people you're anticipating, because I mean, you have to staff it appropriately, so they usually have a pretty good indicator of how many people are there, but we certainly don't want to create a safety issue of, blocking our streets, much like a drive-through, and you have peak hours for daycare, in the mornings and the afternoons, and so it's certainly worthy of evaluation and putting that in as at least a standard to discuss to make sure that they're sufficient. Now, whether or not it requires a whole loop that goes around the building, I mean, that's something that I think is very contextual.
Okay.
Where do things like the Discovery Day School at the Methodist Church fit in? Are they considered schools or daycares?
I think you can actually, Discovery Church, there are some instances where it might fit into the, like the school standards, but yeah, I would think that a lot of it would be here as well. I mean, so, you know, we would look at this. I think even religious assembly facilities have in a provision for daycare. I'm almost certain that that is included in there, that that's something that we evaluate within a religious assembly use.
And I'm thinking about queuing requirements, for example, in those places, because it does back up during pickup and drop off. But those places would be existing facilities and.
Yeah, and I think you would have to discuss a plan. Yeah, those would be existing facilities, but I mean, you know, as part of that, you would be discussing, you know, what's your plan? You know, how do you plan to address this, so that way at least people are thinking about it on the front end.
Right, okay.
Any more questions on that?
So this is prospective, right? They, you know, the existing places aren't gonna have to go back and read.
Correct. Yeah, they're allowed to stay. We hope that they do.
Right, I understand.
Yeah. Okay, and so then we have other modifications related to chapters 5 and 6 and chapter 10, definitions, and the appendix. And a lot of this is a result of the tree board hired a consultant to come in and evaluate, you know, many of the ordinances that we have on file within the city to see, you know, what's working, what's not. You know, go out into the field. We did a lot of field visits and looking at very, you know, granular things, looking at parking, you know, parking lots and plantings associated with parking lots, and what's working, what's not. And so our consultant, Matt Nielsen, he, you know, evaluated, worked with us, and then proposed a series of recommendations associated with that. There's also another element to this. Back when we adopted this new land development code in 2017, prior to that, all of the landscaping requirements associated with our code were actually in the municipal code. And so one of the elements that we wanted to do was bring them into one particular document. So that way, if you're developing a particular site, you have one document that you're looking at, for the most part, to develop your property. So that's where you see chapters 5 and 6 of our current land development code that have landscaping and tree mitigation requirements associated with it. Appendix does have some things, so too did the definitions. But what didn't happen was chapter 34 in the municipal code, it still exists. You know, the reality is we use this provision of code. And so what we have done with our consultant, with Judy Daniel, myself, and several other staff, we've gone in and we've evaluated exactly where chapter 34 is, where it now exists inside of the land development code or other codes, or it doesn't, because it wasn't a good requirement, and so we made those modifications. And so what you see is a lot of housekeeping elements here to clean up really chapter 34. There's a few elements of 98, and we're still 98's the street roads chapter in the municipal code. And so what you're seeing is some of those elements being moved. So like our tree lists, we have tree lists that are inside of the appendix. We do have some tree lists that are actually inside of the municipal code, and so we're trying to house them all in one place and reference them. So all of our tree lists would be associated with the land development code here. And so as such, you see some modification, for example, to, you know, so to those tree lists. So we've evaluated certain species. So our tree lists include, you know, like parking lot trees and right-of-way trees, and even, you know, trees that are appropriate for planting for mitigation purposes. An example of something that we have found as part of this work with our consultant, we've had, you might even see it at like the hospital and Kroger, you see, what you want are parking lot trees that have, good canopy structure that help provide shade, reduce the heat island effect associated with the pavement that's there, also provide some shade for your cars when you park under them, so when you get in your car, it's not so hot. And what we found in some of these instances where people or developers are planting like columnars, so they grow very much like a column. They don't spread out, and they grow taller. And the lists previously allowed for that. And so we've taken that into consideration with these modifications. A parking lot tree like previously that was allowed as a crepe myrtle. Well, I try to avoid all the crepe myrtles when we park out here in the back in City Hall, especially when they're flowering, because those flowers all wind up on the car, they stick there, and then it rains, and then they're just a pain. So you can see a modification to these lists to kind of clean them up. The lists previously didn't include the scientific names associated with each of the trees, so we've added those. Also, we've created a do not plant list. So trees that we've seen issues with, either they're not successful, they're invasive, there are issues like an ash tree with the boar ash, the ash borer. So creating some of these things that we don't want to see, and the columnars and things like that. So that's been cleaned up inside of the list. And so as such, you see these are the elements that we're proposing to change or clean up inside of our code that reference back to chapter 34 or 98. I've gone ahead and included chapter 34 and 98 inside here, although that's something for the board to take into consideration. But all we're requesting are these modifications to the ordinance. Happy to answer any questions.
So the tree inventory, 1.4?
Say it again?
It's an inventory and permit required. So like, if you got 30 acres, you gotta go and count all your oak trees and all your pine trees.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the tree mitigation process.
That's part of what they already do.
That's right.
Okay, this is a plug, but do y'all know about this new app that some Oxonians have developed?
No.
It's called Timber, TMBR.
Oh yeah, I do know about that,
That, and I think that's what it does. It tells you, on this 30 acres, you have this many chestnut trees and this many, like, from the sky, like magic. Yeah.
Very neat.
And, Sam Webb has, with some other people, have done it. So proud of it. Yeah.
That's cool.
And just now launched. So.
Can you say it one more time?
Timber, I think it's TMBR.
Okay.
TMBR, yeah, and has little
Very
trees
cool.
on it.
Can we go through each species and discuss why it's on the list now?
Do you want to? I mean, we did that with the tree board when we brought this before them for discussion and consideration, but
No, that's all right. Yeah, any other?
Is the proposal to get rid of 34 and 98, have those?
not necessarily
just
98. It's
reconciling.
going to get rid of 34, which was the landscaping provisions inside the municipal code. That was always the intent. That's what we did. Not 98 though.
Other questions?
I guess, does 98 change how the tree board works? It kind of looks like who's responsible for what?
With some respect, it does. It doesn't necessarily change how it works, but I mean, we've got Greg Pinion, who's the director of buildings and grounds, who's on the tree board as well and keeps them very well informed on what's happening. He's also he's had some discussions about, and one of the recommendations is from our consultant is that buildings and grounds actually hires a full-time arborist or a contract arborist, which would be a consulting arborist. And so that's something that they're working on. But, you know, Greg's extremely knowledgeable on, you know, on plantings and trees and things of that nature. And so, you know, I think we have more resources available now, you know, and people like Greg that didn't previously exist. And so I think Greg will keep the tree board informed on, you know, certain projects related to the city on, you know, city property or in the right of way like he already does. Otherwise, I mean, the tree board still exists. I mean, they still evaluate projects. They do have a liaison to the planning, you know, planning related items. I attend their tree board meetings each month and try and keep them updated as best as we can.
Thank you, Ben. Any final questions, comments, or apps? No? Is there a motion on case number 2976? Oh, sorry. Please.
I just was thinking about making a brief comment.
Drew, do you want to come
Could
up?
you come up to the front, please? Yeah.
We've got people online, so and it's being recorded.
Well, you know, it's funny because I was making my way home today, and I thought, well, I could watch it on YouTube or I could hang out with you folks. Where's that bar?
Please state your name.
Hey, like the price is right. Drew Stevens, live over on the south end of Combe Street, excuse me. And really, I just wanted to offer support and echo, I think, what's been said here. And that is that, you know, I would want to make sure that we continue to strengthen, you know, the city's commitment to preserving all trees, mainly as a buffer. Because, and it's funny that, you know, this came up maybe kind of twice tonight, but it takes a second to lose a tree. I mean, but it takes, you know, it takes a generation for it to get back. And it just seems that if we stay tough on that and we stay strong on that, then that'll be our reputation and people will know that and they'll say, hey, look, Oxford really respects trees. You better, you know, watch what you're doing. And then, you know, I don't know if the tree board hired a consultant to tell them they can sit back for a minute or what happened there, but if it seems like it's going to more of a, maybe away from a committee feel, you know, I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, it's certainly going to be a lot more efficient, and you know, there's probably more accountability there too. One thing I did want to ask was the redundancy in the language that kind of got, you know, morphed into something that moved to the land development code. Is that right? So in having that and taking that, instead of having it as an ordinance and moving it to the land development code, does that in any way weaken the, you know, the overseeing the scope?
Yeah, it's still,
The municipal code as well, it's just a different section within the municipal code. It's just, it's called, you know, what we often refer to it as the municipal code. Even the land development code is in the municipal code, but we just talk about it as kind of a separate, different document. It's still inside the municipal code.
because
We're going through what we're doing right now,
Right.
creating an ordinance change.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good for things to be cleaned up. I just didn't know if, you know, moving it from one to the other, or, you know, that was not.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, procedurally, we're just recommending these changes. This will have to go to the mayor and board as a change to the ordinance. And as Ben said, this exists as a chapter within the municipal code, and it's separated out as the land development code because we try to put all of the elements related to development in one place. It makes it easier for developers, it makes it easier for us to try to administer that, but it's still part of the ordinance. And the cleanup was just not to have things stated in two chapters of the ordinance.
Sure.
Didn't the land development code come after some of the tree stuff was already in existence, and that's why we had it two different places anyway, isn't that right?
Honestly, I mean, our code of ordinances has been Frankenstein together for decades, and every once in a while, we come up with something that, I mean, it's like, you have some sections of the, the chapter of the code that deals with roads that also have to do with development, so you have to go look at two different places. I mean, it just is how it's happened over the years. And part of it too has been that as we've gotten more robust, planning and development services department, that they have taken responsibility for more, right? And so something that didn't historically, wasn't really considered a planning issue, like trees, is now reviewed as part of the planning process, and it's, a bigger part of their job than it was when the city first came up with the idea of, heritage trees, and when we first started looking at protection trees. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that has evolved over the years.
Makes sense to me. I think it'll actually strengthen it.
Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Final questions? All right. May I have a motion on case number 2976 on the recommendation for the modifications to the land development code?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second? Second. There is a second. All in favor? All right. If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Adjourn.